Greetings to everyone. I am Anel Ruth D. Celis. Today I will be talking all about sexual orientation, gender identity expression, and sex characteristic. I would like to inform everyone that after the discussion, a Google form must be filled in to ensure that you have learned a lot from this lesson. But before that, let us start first to see if you are with me in this discussion. Let's spot the difference. Check and observe the picture from left to right and from top to bottom. Point out in what row, from top to bottom, and in what column, from left to right, seems to be a different star. Upon knowing, message your facilitator the row number, the column number, and then how many seconds were you able to detect the difference. Again, message your facilitator of what is the row number, column number, and how many seconds were you able to detect the difference. Yes, if you have answered row 2, column number 3, then you are on the spot. What have you observed on this activity? In an online class, definitely, aside from your hearing, your eyes are really working hard to catch up the lesson. The spot the difference activity will taught all of us if we are able to perceive visually of what is going on. To see the picture posted in the presentation means you are perceiving. Finding the difference by checking all features of the star means you are looking. And if you watch the eyes of the star and has observed that the star in row 2, column 3 has eyes looking to the right, means you are watching. Therefore, everyone, let's see, look, and watch. Welcome to Sexual Orientation, Gender Expression, and Sex Characteristics lecture. Let us have a review first. Again, this activity needs you to message your facilitator and mark it with review activity 1. And from 1 to 5, answer if the statement is true or false. However, if your answer is false, then send a smiley face. If your answer is true, then send a heart. Kindly read and understand the statement. And let me repeat again the instruction: a smiley face if it is false and heart if it is true. So number 1 statement. Number 2 statement. Number 3 statement. Again, if it's false, it's a smiley face. If it's true, it's a heart. Number 4 statement. And number 5 statement, our last number for our review activity number 1. So thank you very much for answering. And let me just repeat: a smiley face if it's false and a heart if it is true. I am hoping that you have sent a 4 smiley faces and a heart to your facilitator, because in the next few slides, you will definitely know why all 4 items from statement number 1 to 4 is false and only 1 is true. To start, are you familiar with these people? If you are, then you definitely know and understand the characteristics of these people. And there might be misconceptions and a form descriptions already in your mind. In a scopewhoop.com, a popular quote was posted and it says, "I was a normal child, but it's the world that made me feel different." Why does it say so? According to psychology, before preschool, definitely you cannot remember any of your memories. You may not recall what you've been doing before and how you act out. And so, logically wise, you were normal back then. But as we grow up, we fill in our minds with perceptions and norms. Then we were able to analyze that your community or your family has shaped you of your views towards the world. And so, the world becomes different. If you are with me right now, I want you to empty your brain of that perception. The discussion may not be what you're told to by your community or your family. And in order for you to learn, we need first to unlearn. Because unlearning is also learning. So earlier in our review session, you were asked if female and male are what we call gender. So the answer is no, because sex is not equivalent to gender. Remember that there are no descriptors of gay, straight, bi, or transgender because we are all is a person. Therefore, I am a person, and that my genitals do not define my gender because, gender is equality is not a woman's issue. It is a human issue and it affects us all. The men, or for men of quality, do not fear equality because love has no gender. Take a look at this gender bread. So it is divided into identity, in which is in the brain part, and attraction, in which is in the heart part. So sex, of course, are the reproductive part of either or you are male or you are a female. And that the whole body itself, or the total characteristics and behavior that you are portraying, is your expression. And these different parts has connotates different characteristics in your body, as well as your sexual orientation and as well as your gender identity. So let's start discussing what is sexual orientation. It is being portrayed in your heart. And each person's capacities profound in whether it's emotional, affectional, and sexual attraction to, and intimate and sexual relations with, defines your sexual orientation as a person. So you will be asking yourself if to whom you are attracted with or who do you love with. Let us differentiate what is romantic orientation and what is sexual orientation. So between the two hugot, which reflects romantic orientation and sexual orientation, which is a romantic one and which of which is a sexual one? Yes, if you say that the hugot that tells us, that states, hindi mo pa nga ako binabato, tinamaan ako sa'yo, is actually a romantic orientation, di ba? Makasana all naman tayo. It's because it characterizes any individual whose attachment towards a certain person is defined using our heart. Diba? The other hugot naman, diba? Kung wala kang balak mahalin, landiin mo na lang dahil sa panahon ngayon, mauuso na ang MU. Malanding ugnayan. So it means attraction is not defined romantically, but with the notion of sexual intimacy. And so in our discussion, we won't be tackling romantic relationship, but more with sexual relationship. So the question is, if the question is, whom am I attracted with? Therefore, it portrays sexual orientation. Okay, so we will be tackling right now different types or different classifications of sexual orientation. And I have cited this one from Jakarta, Isian, and Elga. So there are a lot actually of different sexual orientation, but I only tackle here familiar and popular sexual orientation. So let me start with asexual. So maybe most of you or maybe some of you may know what is asexual, but asexual people are those person who do not have desire to act on attraction to anyone, and but does not mean they are sexless, ano? So ibig sabihin nun, although they are not attracted to anyone, yet meron naman silang sex life. So we call them asexual. And the other one is what we call bisexual. So comparatively to asexual, bisexual are people attracted to peoples of one's own gender and people of other gender. Let me remind all of you that just because you have a vagina does not mean to say you are already a female. Okay? So what I am referring right now is gender. Okay? So it is based on how the community and the environment has raised a certain person and not because of their biological characteristics. Okay? Let me have that one. Let me pinpoint that one. Okay? I am referring to gender and I am not referring to sex. Okay? So when we say bisexual, these are people attracted to one's own gender and people of other gender. So, if for example ako ay babae, so I am attracted to both babae at lalaki. And that's what we call as bisexual. In the community or in terminologies in the community, we call them bi. Okay? Aside from bisexual, of course, we have gay. The sexual orientation of gay generally refers to a man who is attracted to men. Ito lang yung sasabihin ko, no? Ito lang sasabihin ko. Just because siya ay lalaki and she is vain, sorry, not she, okay? Just because he is vain and medyo may kalandian and tsaka laging tumitingin sa salamin, does not mean to say immediately that you can connotate such person to be gay. Okay? Who knows the gender of a person? It's the person itself. So, if siya, sinabi niya sa lahat na ako ay bakla or gay, then therefore, he is a gay because he himself accepted it that he is a gay. And when we say a gay is attracted to a man. Okay? He is a man attracted to men. Okay? That is a gay. Okay? And comparatively to gay, we have also lesbian who are women attracted to women. Okay? So in our terminology, in our community, we call them tomboy and yumbots or yumbots, diba? Tomboy or yumbots. Okay? There is actually a misconception in the community that once a certain woman is portraying masculinity or yung mga medyo siga-siga or yung mga katawan nila is medyo yung katawan nila is medyo may pagkalalaki, so we connotate them immediately as lesbian, no? No, we cannot actually define a certain person because of their biological characteristics or because of how they portray themselves. Because the only person who can acknowledge their sexual orientation is that person also, is ourselves also. So if a person, if you are a person who is attracted to women and you are a woman, then therefore you are lesbian. Okay? If lang yan ha, kung ikaw ay babae tapos yung gusto mo ay babae, then of course you are a lesbian. Okay? Aside from lesbian, we have also pansexual or fluid. If you were able to watch Jessica Soho, meron siyang na-feature doon na bakla, kasi sabi nga niya, bakla siya, di ba? And then, he was always competing in a beauty pageant, in a gay pageant. But then, when she met her wife, okay, yung nakilala niya na yung wife niya, parang naglaho na daw ang lahat kasi she wanted to get married, or he wanted to get married with that woman, and he was attracted to such gender. And so, even though he was competing in a gay competition, then he find out that he's attracted to his wife. So, yung ano niya, yung ni-refer niya doon na term sa sexual orientation niya is pansexual or fluid, because it's attracted to people regardless of gender. Questioning. We have also the term questioning. These are people who are unsure or choose to hold off sexual or gender identity. Yung hindi nagsasabi sa atin kung ano talaga yung sexual orientation nila. Yung hindi nagsasabi sa atin kung sino ang, kung saan or sino ang mga sino-sino ang mga na-attract nila, babae ba or lalaki. So we call them questioning. Okay? Aside from questioning, we have the word queer. But let me remind all of you that by the book, okay, in the book, queer is a derogatory remarks, and there might be people very sensitive of them being called a queer, because a queer is somewhat demeaning a certain person in the LGBTQ community. However, there are actually researches that pinpoints that a queer could be a pansexual because they have become, or they've been identified to have a self-identification themselves. But for us, in order for us not to demean those people, maybe we should avoid using the word queer, because yeah, it could be a derogatory for them. Okay, aside from queer, of course, we have the straight sexual orientation. So these are people attracted to opposite sex. So we are now using here the opposite sex. Okay, so therefore a male is attracted to female, and a female is attracted to male. Okay, so these are straight people in which a female is attracted to male, a male is attracted to female. That is a straight sexual orientation. Aside from straight, we have also androsexual. And when we say androsexual, these are people attracted to masculine gender preference. So these are persons na kahit babae siya or lalaki siya, basta meron siyang masculinity, okay, he or she is portraying masculine characteristics, a certain person is attracted to the masculinity itself. Either it's a female or a male. Okay? Aside from androsexual, we have also gynosexual, and these are persons attracted to feminine gender preference. So, kanina, medyo masculine, walang ano doon kung babae ba siya or lalaki. Ito naman, maski babae or lalaki, basta yung characteristics niya is feminine, so na-attract siya doon. Okay? So, these are the familiar and popular sexual orientations. You may have different sexual orientations in which is not being discussed right now, but I just covered this one because these are the popular and familiar ones. So, the question right now is, so upon learning your sexual orientation, the question is, whom are you attracted with? Or what is your sexual orientation? Okay, so you are the one who can ask yourself if whom are you attracted with sexually, or the gender preferences that you are attracted with, because it is you yourself knows who you are and knows what you wanted to do, or what you want to be, or whom you want to be with. Okay, so these sexual orientations, or the sexual orientations that I have discussed earlier, may be your point of citation, or maybe your point of a point in yourself that you may ask yourself, what is your sexual orientation? However, and so we need to understand that no one should be discriminated against because of their sexual orientation. We need to understand that in our society, in our community, there are really people who is or are attracted to the to different kinds of gender and to different kinds of sex because it's their right to love them and it's their right to be intimate with them, because it is us ourselves who knows and understand who we are and whom we want to be. And it's a matter of being sensitive in our community that there really is people that is kinda different from us and has different also perception about the world that we are living in. And so we are done with sexual orientation. So that is a matter of the heart discussion. Right now, we will be discussing about a matter of the brain. It's what we call gender identity, because gender identity refers to each person's deeply or how deeply they felt internally and the individual experience of gender, which may or may not correspond with the sex assigned at birth. So these are identities that they know for themselves, and it's a matter of their brain telling them that this is their gender. Okay? So the question is, who am I? Okay? So for gender identity, a certain person must ask himself of who they are, because it's not all about whom they are attracted now, but it's all about themselves telling them who they are as a person. So if you could check the picture, it reflects and shows us that a certain person is actually is questioning himself or herself of which door will he or she opens, diba? So it's a matter really of us answering if who they are really as a person. Okay, so earlier we are discussing about sexual orientation, or we are discussing of who you are as a person. So we call this one gender identity. And there are actually specific gender identity being pointed out by different scholars and by different psychologists that which may be familiar to all of you. So one gender identity is what we call cisgender. Okay, so a cisgender is actually a gender identity that society considers to match biological sex assigned at birth. So which means to say, if you have a vagina, then therefore you are a female, and if you have testosterone, then you are a male. So if you have both, of course, we call them intersex. And cisgender is a gender identity for those people who match their biological sex assigned at birth. Okay? Aside from cisgender, we have also transgender, and these are what we call gender benders, because benders has no desire for surgery or hormones from transsexual, but they transgress dominant conceptions of gender. So, tinatawag natin silang transgender. Meron ako mamayang ipapakitang examples. Okay? Aside from transgender, we have also what we call gender fluid. And gender fluid are what we call gender queer. And remember, queer is a derogatory marks. However, scientifically, they are called gender queer because their gender varies over time. So, meron yung nakikita na natin, yung lalaki ngayon is lalaki siya. After 10 years, yung nangyari sa kanya, naging medyo bakla-bakla na yung ano niya, yung medyo malandi-landi na yung mga ini-exhibit niya at pinoportray niya na action. Then later on, at the peak of his time, is naging babae. So we call them gender fluid. Then at the end, 'di ba, naging lalaki na naman siya. So that's what we call it, varies over time. So we call them gender fluid. And of course, we have a gender. So it's not having a gender. So we have also people who do not have a gender. It's because they lack of, descriptions of being gender neutral, or or they are people who assign themselves as gender neutral or genderless, or they are gender free. So we call them a gender. So remember, cisgender are those assigned by birth matches their biological sex, and transgender are those people who do not have desire for surgery to change their reproductive organs, but they transgress dominant conceptions of gender. And we have gender fluid because there are people, it varies over time because people may change their gender over time, and a gender, which is a gender free or gender neutral people. So an example of a cisgender is, I put myself there as an example because I believe I am a cisgender because my assigned sex birth matches what I feel, or what I feel is who am I. And then we have also what we call a SOGIE, or those attracted to opposite sex, and we have also a cisgay, those attracted to gay, and cisless because they are attracted to lesbian. So I prefer to call myself cisgender. And these are examples of transgender. Okay? And these are examples of transsexual. So a transgender has no operation. They did not change their sexual reproductive organ to a different one. But a transsexual are those people who underwent surgery. The girl there, I don't know if it's a girl or it's a boy, but the image that I caption is that it is an example of a gender fluid. Okay? Remember what is a gender fluid? It may vary over time. So baka ngayon, ganyan siya, then later on, maging ganito siya, then balik na naman. So it varies depending on the person itself. So these are examples also of a gender in which they are gender free or gender neutral. Kaya yung nangyayari sa fashion natin is meron na tayong mga gender neutral na fashion style because it does not reflect of any gender, but it's a gender free or gender neutral free fashion style. So my question now is, what is your gender identity? Upon knowing that the four that I have discussed are different types of your gender identity. So the question is, what is your gender identity? Are you a female, a male? Are you a cisgender? Are you a gender fluid, or any? What is your gender identity? And so to understand everything, but earlier we were talking about the heart, the brain, and we will be talking now about your gender expression, or how you express yourself as who you are. And this is what we call as a matter of our body characteristics, or how we reflected it in our body. And gender expression means it's the way in which a person expresses gender identity, and it typically through their appearance, their dress, and their behavior. And so, if you are expressing your internal self, okay, we call that one gender expression. But we have here in our psychology, we have the I and me concept. When we say I, it's your internal self, and the me concept is how you portray yourself outside of your internal self. And so, you may have a different I based on yourself, but you also have a different me in yourself, because sometimes according to psychology, your me self or yung me mo is naapektuhan kung ano yung meron ka sa environment. You cannot readily express your I self because there may be certain points in your life that may inflect your expression of how you are, of what is your gender identity is. So I'm reflecting that gender identity itself is your internal self, and your gender expression is your external expression. There are actually 3 classifications of gender expression that I am going to discuss right now. So the first gender expression is the androgynous. Okay, so remember, it's a bodily concept and it's how you portray yourself outside of yourself. So when we say androgynous, it's actually a combination of masculine and feminine characteristics, because if you are a female, you may have a masculine you may be yung medyo masiga-siga kayo, or you portray yourself as, nagsasuot kayo ng salawal, nagsusuot kayo of those fashion styles for men. But you could be also feminine by characteristics, because you may have the female nature of being vain, and so you express it in your body. So we call them androgynous because it's a combination of being masculine and feminine by nature. And of course, we have feminine because these are qualities or an appearance culturally associated with women. And, sometimes nakikita natin yung difference of how women portray themselves and how men portray themselves. So, parang kapag culturally associated siya sa babae, we call them feminine. But if it's associated with men, then we call them masculine. So, nagdidepende yon sa culture, or nagdidepende yon sa norms. Kasi, for example, if you are in Scotland, their men wear skirt. Pero okay lang naman sa kanila. But if they are in the Philippines and those male are wearing skirt in the Philippines, 'di ba, sometimes we connotate then, ano ba yan, lalaki nagsusuot ng palda. So because it's not culturally associated with us. Okay? So in the Philippines, it's kind of it's kind of different, but in Scotland, it's okay and it's normal. So this is how we express, this is the categories of gender expression in a person. So if you are expressing both masculinity and feminine characteristics, then you are androgynous. If it's associated to women, that's femininity. And if it's associated to men, so therefore it's masculinity. So this is an example of an androgynous. So nakikita ninyo, they are expressing themselves whether they're female or male. They could be masculine, they could be feminine. So these are androgynous example. And for the Filipino people, of course, yung nasasabi natin, kapag babae ka dito sa Pilipinas, of course, you need to have dalagang Pilipina characteristics. And if you are a Filipino, or kapag lalaki ka, pag nandito ka sa Pilipinas, of course, you must portray the masculine culture of the Filipino people. Okay, and so we are done already discussing about sexual orientation, gender identity, and as well as your gender expression. Now we will be talking about your sex characteristics. So what is a sex characteristic? Earlier, we've been telling you that sex is not equivalent to gender because sex characteristics is biological by nature, and it's a physical traits that indicates biological sex, such as your chromosomes, genitalia, your gonads, your hormones, and reproductive organs. So it could only be three types of characteristics. You could be a male, you could be a female, and you could be an intersex. So these are sex characteristics. It's based on your reproductive, it's based on your biological characteristics. And so this is sex, okay? So it has your chromosomes. So if you're a female, you have an XX chromosomes, and if you are a male, you have an XY chromosomes. So parang parang segue lang sa discussion natin, no? So yung, 'di ba, we have this culture that male pressured female to give birth to a male. So parang lang scientifically kasi yung may chromosome lang talaga na XY is si male. So, kapag hindi nakaanak ng lalaki, yung isang babae, it will depend actually on the male kasi sila lang yung may Y na chromosomes because female has an XX chromosome. So, yung nagbibigay ng Y na chromosome is yung male. So, wala lang, lang natin, segue lang natin sa discussion because this is what we call a sex, the biological characteristics that we have as a human being. Of course, we have also an intersex. So, it's a group of people with conditions that there might be discrepancy between their external genitals and their internal genitals. And elderly, before we call them hermaphrodites, but we cannot generally call them hermaphrodites because hermaphrodites may be also, it could be a more female characteristics or it could be a more male characteristics. So we call them intersex. And in the Philippines, there are few cases that we have listed for intersex sex characteristics. So yung nakikita natin na both merong male at saka merong female na mga genitals, we call them intersex. So why do we need to understand sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics? It's definitely because it's very important for all of us to know and to become sensitive in our environment, because it's how we act out ourselves with each other, because as a human being we need to socially interact with people, and sometimes we disregard these things and we may discriminate them or bully them, that we forget that they have their own characteristics, and all of us have our own characteristics. So the Philippine Commission on Women actually reported that there could be an unfair treatment, partially or fully, in any institutions or higher in schools for LGBT. Ano? So they've been telling us what is SOGIE, because they wanted to eradicate or as long as prevent this kind of happening, because sometimes or oftentimes we forget that we have this kind of situation in our universities, and we have this kind of situation also even in an online platform. Okay, so the Philippine Commission on Women has further described to us, or has further explained to us, why do we need to talk about SOGSC. It's because if we talk about what is SOGSC, then we could break misconceptions that hamper achievement of gender equality and women empowerment. Because as a person who is working in the government, and as a student who is right now in a public education or in a public service, then therefore we need to understand that it's our responsibility to educate those people who may not know what is a sexual orientation, gender identity expression, as well as sex characteristics, because they've been into the traditional perception that there is only two types of population, and that's being a woman and that's being a man. But rather than being a woman and men, we characterize them as female and male for sex. And of course for gender, because gender has a lot of dimensions, then of course we can understand that there are really different kinds of people and different kinds of personalities in a different environment, in every environment. So furthermore, PCW tells us that talking about SOGEC will help us avoid unconscious insensitivity of a certain person, because we now know that there is really different types of people, and there is differences when it comes to heart, our brain, our body, and as well as our sex characteristics. And so we become sensitive with what they need and what they are up to or what they act upon, because we know that they're different from us. And so because we are talking about development, so if all of us is on the same plane, or on the same perception, then we could actually differentiate of how we can attain development. So in this picture, there is actually a difference of how we put gender and development as our mantra, because we always believe of equality, but before achieving equality we need first to have equity. So if you could check the difference here, diba? If you could check the difference here, for those people who is taller, we do not need to do something for them because they are already tall. But for those people who have who is medium size, okay, who is a little bit taller but not tall at all, so we give them a little backs. And for those short people, we give them higher boxes, so that all of us could attain equity. And if we attain equity, then we were able to achieve equality. Because maybe you may point to us that gender and development is all about women. No, it's not all about women. It's not all about the LGBTQ community. It's not only also about men. But the gender and development is there to perceive that those marginalized sector can be also given priority, so that they can attain also what those people who have attained already. So this is what we believe is gender and development. And so we need to remember, because in a nutshell, according to the Philippine Commission on Women, we live in a world of diversity, and the sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, sex characteristics seminar or webinar should not be used for unequal treatment and discrimination, but it must be discussed. We invest on our differences, and that we are duty bearers mandated to protect and promote the rights of everyone, and we cannot force anyone to disclose SOGIE SC and assume that everything is okay. Because gender and development, gender and development is all about being faithful to the principle that development is for all, and to have this fairness and equity that we have demanded for everyone in the society, whether we are a male or a female, we have the same right and opportunities to achieve such life for a full and satisfying life that we want to. And the takeaways here, ladies and gentlemen, to our dear students, the takeaway is that the word respeto, okay? Because the word respeto tells us a very heavy responsibility, because it's a word that we wanted to portray, and I would love all of you to portray as a student of Biliran Province State University. So, according to that hugot, no, ang respeto ay isang salita na hindi kayang ibigay ng mga taong bastos sa kanyang kapwa. We need to respect ourselves so that we can respect others, and human as we are, we socially interact, and so we need to discipline ourselves and give that respect. Because when you respect yourself, others will respect you. And so these are my references for these presentations and lectures, and hoping that you were able to get a lot of insights and a lot of knowledge, as well as awareness of what is sexual orientation, gender identity expression, and sex characteristics. So this is the Google form that you need to type and search and then fill in the form. So it actually asks your willingness to answer. So I'm hoping that everyone is willing to answer the Google form. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And may God bless us all.